In the beginning, before empires, before written words, before the memory of kings faded into dust, the land between two rivers was alive with the murmur of creation. The Euphrates and the Tigris carved their way through a plain of mud and reeds, feeding the first cities mankind had ever known. Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, cities of gods and mortals, rising from the earth like dreams made of clay. And from that clay humanity began to write its story. It was here, in the cradle of civilization, that the world first asked a question that would haunt every ruler to come. How does one bring order to chaos? Long before Hammurabi, long before Rome's laws or Solomon's wisdom, there lived a man who dared to answer that question. His name was Ur-Nammu, king of Ur, shepherd of Sumer, and the first to carve justice into stone. His reign was brief, his empire ancient, and yet his idea would outlive them all. Ur-Nammu's world was not one of peace. The Akkadian Empire had crumbled, and the light that had once unified Sumer flickered in the shadows. The Gutians, wild mountain tribes, had swept across the land like a storm, destroying cities, toppling temples, and leaving the people of Sumer in despair. For nearly a century chaos reigned. The gods had turned their faces away, and men began to wonder if the age of kings had ended forever. But from the city of Ur, a man rose who would not accept ruin. Ur-Nammu began as a soldier serving under Utu-Hegel, the king of Uruk. Together they fought to drive the Gutians back into the mountains, reclaiming the cities of Sumer one by one. The people rejoiced, believing the gods had chosen new champions. Yet fate is never kind to those who wield power. One day Utu-Hegel drowned in the river, some say by accident, others by design. And from that moment Ur-Nammu stepped forward, placing the crown upon his own head. He declared himself king of Ur and lord of Sumer and Akkad, and the third dynasty of Ur was born. He ruled not as a conqueror but as a rebuilder. Temples were restored, canals reopened, and the great ziggurat of Ur, a mountain of sun-baked brick, began to rise under his command. From its summit, priests of the moon god Nana once again lit sacred fires that glowed across the desert night. Ur-Nammu believed himself chosen, not merely by birth but by destiny. Yet unlike so many kings before him, his vision of destiny was not carved from blood, but from order. He saw the suffering of his people, the chaos of vengeance and corruption, and sought to bring peace through reason. In those days justice was a matter of power. The strong ruled the weak. A noble could strike down a commoner and pay no price. The gods were invoked to justify cruelty, and priests sold mercy for silver. But Ur-Nammu dreamed of something greater. He dreamed of laws that did not depend on wealth or status, laws that were written, visible, eternal. He called his scribes to him, men trained in the sacred art of cuneiform. On tablets of clay, they pressed wedges and lines that would carry the first code of law the world had ever known. It began with reverence, as all things in Sumer did. By the command of Nana, the lord of the moon, and of Utu, the god of justice, Ur-Nammu, the mighty king, has established equity in the land. From there he laid down his decrees. If a man committed murder he would die for his crime. But for other offenses, injury, theft, or insult, punishment took the form of compensation. No longer would vengeance spiral endlessly through families and tribes. Silver could restore balance. Proportion replaced passion. The world for the first time bowed to written reason. It may sound simple now, but in the third millennium before our era, it was revolutionary. To inscribe justice upon clay was to defy the gods themselves. For if law could be written, then perhaps it did not belong only to heaven. Perhaps mortals could define what was right. In those careful lines of cuneiform, Ur-Nammu gave humanity its first glimpse of civilization as we know it, a society where fairness could outlast fury. And for a time the land prospered. The canals flowed, the markets thrived, and the temples of Ur grew rich with offerings. Messengers carried the king's decrees across Sumer, and for the first time villages far from the palace could appeal to written law. People spoke of Ur-Nammu as a just and wise ruler, one who favored truth over tyranny. But justice has a price. The priests whispered that Ur-Nammu was too proud, that his laws had made him forget the divine order. The gods, they said, gave kingship to man, but only as caretakers. To make laws as if one were a god was to invite their wrath. Yet Ur-Nammu did not yield. He believed the gods had chosen him for this very purpose, to bring balance between heaven and earth. His empire grew. He conquered Lagash and Umma, bringing the rival city-states under one rule. Inscriptions from his reign speak of peace and abundance, of festivals and divine favor. But behind the carved words the cracks were already forming. The same ambition that drove him to unify Sumer began to drive him toward overreach. He waged campaigns in the distant north, seeking to secure his borders and his legacy. His soldiers marched under the burning sun, following their king through lands where the gods were strangers. Then one day fate turned against him. The records grow silent, but the echoes remain. Ur-Nammu fell in battle, some say betrayed, others claim struck down by the will of the gods. The great king, the Lawgiver, was thrown from his chariot and left to die in the dust. In the city of Ur, grief swept like a flood. The priests wailed. The people tore their garments. For a king in Sumer was not merely a ruler, he was the bridge between gods and men. And now that bridge had fallen. His body was brought back to Ur and entombed with gold and lapis, surrounded by offerings to guide him through the underworld. The scribes composed laments in his honor. The shepherd is gone from his flock. The king who brought order sleeps beneath the earth. Who will guide the people now? His son Shulgi ascended the throne. At first he ruled in his father's image, expanding the empire, continuing the building works, refining the laws. He declared himself divine, a living god among men. But where Ur-Nammu had sought justice, Shulgi sought glory. He extended his power through conquest, trade, and fear. His reign would last longer, shine brighter, but burn colder. And so it was that Ur-Nammu's dream began to fade. His laws, once a symbol of fairness, became tools of the powerful once again. The temples grew rich, the poor grew silent, and the gods, ever watchful, turned their gaze elsewhere. Within a few generations, the empire of Ur collapsed under invasion and rebellion. The ziggurat he built stood like a skeleton in the sand, a monument to both the greatness and the fragility of human order. Yet something of Ur-Nammu endured. For centuries after his death, his code was remembered, copied, and adapted. Hammurabi would later write his own laws, claiming divine authority, but the pattern, the idea, was Ur-Nammu's. The notion that justice could be reasoned, that a king's duty was to protect, not just command. That seed was planted in Sumer's soil, and it grew into the foundation of every civilization that followed. Today, when we speak of law, when we talk of fairness or equality, we speak unknowingly in the language of Ur-Nammu. His words, pressed into wet clay 4,000 years ago, echo still in every courtroom, every oath, every belief that right should prevail over might. But his story is not simply one of triumph. It is a reminder of the endless struggle between order and chaos, between divine will and human reason. For every law written, there is a force waiting to break it. Every civilization that rises will one day fall. Yet what endures, what truly defines us, are the ideas we carve into the world before the sands reclaim us. And perhaps, if one stands today among the ruins of Ur, where the moon still casts its pale light over the crumbled ziggurat, one can still feel the weight of his dream. The whisper of clay tablets long buried, the echo of a king's voice carried by the wind. He was the first lawgiver, the first to claim that justice belonged not to the gods alone, but to humankind. He ruled in a world of myth and memory, and yet his vision remains, fragile, powerful, eternal. Ur-Nammu, king of Ur. The man who gave order to chaos. The shepherd who wrote the words that would outlast his empire. And though his throne is gone, though the gods he served have turned to dust, his laws, the idea that men can choose fairness over fury, still live, still breathe, still bind us all.